Well, ladies, welcome. So there's the glass that we're going to be working on today, the Pansy, and I'm actually going to do mine on a little dollar store base so that I have something different, and then I'll have a little gift for a family member next time I give somebody flowers. It's really fun to paint on the glass if you haven't before. I like the like a color book type of technique, and it's learning how to use the brushes correctly and how to load the paint correctly. But you do have options with the different brands of the paint. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my overhead right away, and we're going to get started. There we are. Okay. So I assume that you all got your pattern packet. So there is a step-by-step, and that's really great for a reference. Now, when I paint the step-by-steps, I actually paint them on a flat surface because it's really hard to get the right, look when you've got a round surface and you're trying to paint. So I just take a plastic, and this is a good way just to practice even. So like my pattern packet sleeve, I can pattern and just slip it under and paint on top. And because it's slippery, it feels like you're painting on glass. So it is a good way just to practice and get used to the different brushes and the colors, see what you want to come up with. Okay, so to start with, when you're working on a glass, you want to make sure that you wash it really well. And that was in your prep instructions. Don't put it in the dishwasher because the dishwasher has a residue. And so you want to make sure that you're using dish soap, rinse it really well with hot water, warm water, and dry it off. And if you're not at a area like at a convention where you don't have access to a sink right there in a classroom, then I use rubbing alcohol and wipe it off with that. You just want to make sure that you're getting any fingerprints off, any oily residue that might be on there from shipping the glass and things. But dollar store is a really great source for finding all kinds of fun glassware that you can paint on, and inexpensive surface to do. So to start with, when you take your pattern and you cut it out, okay, what I like to do is I like to cut closer around the design, and then even cut some little slits in between the elements so that when you go to put this in your glass, it's going to hug up against the glass better because you've got that rounded surface. Then taking either plastic bags, let's see if I can get that to stick in there. Taking plastic bags or even paper towel, something, stuff it in there. I just have one little piece of tape, but then I stuff with paper bags or paper towels so that it really pushes that up against the glass. Okay, so that's the first steps. Okay, now and I've already done that on my vase here so that we're going to have a little bit better area. Anybody need time to get that part done, get your pattern in? Now I've got mine sitting on some paper towels so it doesn't roll so much. So that's another thought, or a regular towel, putting something under it so it's not so slippery is a good idea. I also, just because sometimes I need to angle it different, I put a little tray under my paper towels, but you just need some towels maybe to set it on. And then I did give you a color conversion chart in your packet. However, if you want the full color conversion chart, that is available on my website, jillybean.net. And you can download all the different color charts that I have on there for the conversions for the different types of paint. So it's just handy so that you can use something that you have at home. Now,
you can use a regular palette. I have found I like these little cups, palettes. And I just, there again, I get them at the dollar store. You can get 6 in a pack for, well, now it's $1.25, I think, for the, it's gone up a quarter, but a pack of 6. Now, what I like about this is if I'm not finished painting, I can put this into a little Ziploc baggie and keep the paint wet till I have time to go back and finish my piece, especially if I've mixed a color. I want to be able to save it. And having it in the little cup, it actually keeps it wet longer, keeps it from drying up so much. Now, when it does dry, when I'm all done with the colors, instead of taking and making a mess in my sink washing them, I'll take like a little stylus. I let them totally dry, so just leave it out, and then it becomes plastic, and then you can just pick those color swatches up out of there to clean it. So they're kind of nice to have. And because we don't do a lot of blending like you would in your regular painting, I do more scooping up, and I'll show you all of that. That's why I like these, because then I have a nice thick little pile to scoop up from as I'm painting. Sounds good. All right. So the first thing that we're going to start with is the just kind of some basic basing in. And so this first picture here, we've got the leaves and we've got the flower. Now, typically you would normally want to start with, you know, something that's behind something else. But because the paint stays wet longer, I start in the center and I work my way to each side so that I'm not getting my finger in the wet paint. And we're just kind of doing color book anyway. So let's start with our purples. Okay, now you have choices. I've got, let's see, I used lavender or iris for the, let's see if I got my lavender here. Yep. Okay. So I got lavender or iris. So lavender in the glossy enamel or iris in the satin. And I will use both paints within the same design. They're so close. The satin is just a little less shiny. It's not enough to bother me though. Same with if I choose a color that was maybe in the folk art, because I didn't have it in one of these two, I can use all of them within the same design. I don't have a problem with that. Once you bake them, you're good, and you can intermix them. So don't be afraid to do that. All right, so let's take out some lavender. And I'm going to get some white. We're going to be doing some double loading. Now you could use white, you could use purple cow even, which is a lighter lavender. I'm going to get a little bit of all of them, and then let's see which one I like the best. All right, then what I'm going to do is talk to you first about the brushes while you're getting that set up. So the glass art brushes make a big difference when you're painting on glass. The bristles or the hairs are super, super soft. When you're painting on a shiny, rounded surface, if you use a brush that is too stiff, what happens is it snaps back and it wipes the paint right off the glass. So you can't get a good coverage. That's why I ended up developing the little glass art brushes, because they're so soft, they're going to not snap back. So when I was first asking for these, the brush maker, I was talking to one of the gals that make the brush, and she goes, "You don't want it to snap back?" And I go, "No, because it wipes the paint off the glass." It's like I want it to stay bent so that I follow through with my stroke myself. So these work out great, and they're not that expensive. I'm going to start, first of all, get my little water cup, get some paper towel. Okay, so go ahead and rinse in the water, but wipe it all off.
Okay, now I want to have a variation in the color. So first I start by really plumping the brush up and use like a number 1 round, or you, depending on what size you are. I could have gone up to a number 3, but I'm going to use a number 1. I like to make more strokes with a smaller brush. Okay, now I can use either the purple cow or the white. Let's just go ahead right for the white. And I'm just going to pick some up on one side. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to pull from the outer edge in towards the center. All the stroke work is going to pull towards the very center of your flower. Okay, so I can start like right in the middle. I've got a lot of paint on and I want to follow through with that stroke. Now I want to try to not go over that because I like that variation of color. Pull from the outside till I run into the next petal. Outside till I run into the next petal. Now, if I needed to, I could give myself a little edge on the outside so that it's not quite so bumpy, and then pull in. That's another way to do it too. Very soft touch. I'm not pushing down on the surface. I'm like almost like I'm painting up in the air. I want to see those brush marks. Those are going to make it look like you've got vein lines in your petal. So if I go and I keep playing in there, it's just going to be flat, flat, flat. I'll lose the dimension and I'll lose the vein lines. When I go to reload again, I can just get a large amount of the lavender on one side, white on the other, and then continue. You may only be able to get a few strokes and have to reload often. Now, if you don't like what you've got, you can go over it again. So don't worry too much. And sometimes I just kind of let it dry before I go over it a second time. Okay, I'm gonna do the same thing to the other petal, but let me just, before we get any further, I just want to make sure that you're happy with what you're getting, and if anyone has any questions before we move on. You should have a great coverage already. Now, another thing I forgot to mention is you get a little bit of like this 3D thing going on. So when you first start painting on glass and you go to put your brush down, it's like it hits the glass faster than you think because that pattern is back away from the glass a little bit. So it's a little bit of a illusion that you're getting when you're doing that. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing with the other petal. Double load, pick up both purple and white. I find it easier to start in the middle, pull to the center, and then go on each side of that to fill in the petals. That way they're all pulling in the right direction. Otherwise, sometimes when you start off to one side, you end up pulling that stroke in the wrong direction. Completely pull from one end to the other. Don't stop and do like the pity pat in the middle. You want to see those brush strokes. Pansies were like one of the first flowers when I first started painting. I just loved painting the pansies. So this kind of brings me back to the beginning days of my painting. It was so exciting to, make all this come together. Who knew we'd be doing this for this long? Been really lucky to be able to do something I love for such a long period of time. Okay, now, like I said, we can always go back and fix a spot afterwards. Sometimes I can even do it right now. I really like what I've got. I don't want to mess with it, but I'm going to anyway, just to show you that it's okay. So if I load the brush again, I'll go, whoops, go back to the, maybe the first petal here. I can pull right on top again to fix an area that I didn't like. Okay. Now we try to stay out of the water as much as we can. You're of course going to rinse it, but I try not to add it to the paint is what I'm trying to say. Because when you thin it down too much, that'll take away from the uh, part of the paint that allows it to adhere to the glass. So you're diluting that. So you want to try to keep it as full strength as you can. I do find that when I'm using the folk art paint, I do have to add a drop because that paint is a little bit thicker. Usually the Deco Art glossy enamel or the multi-surface, I'm able to use just as is, unless it's been sitting out for a while. Okay, now I got water in my little cup here, so I'm going to get that out of there before I go any farther. I was a little splashy. Okay. Then we're going to go on to our pink petals. And I believe I used Tuscan Red. You could pick out another pink color too. Make it your own. You don't have to stick to just my colors. So in fact, I'll take a little of both out. So this one is Pink Tropics in the satin. And then I've got the Tuscan Red in the gloss. And then I'll be using some white. All right, so I'm definitely gonna just really plump up that brush again. So I start by really plumping it up with the Tuscan Red. And I think what I'll do is I'll make my two side petals darker, try to get the front one maybe a little lighter. So maybe I'll switch to the other pink for the front. That way they'll stand out from each other a little better. So really plump this up with lots of the Tuscan Red and then scoop up a little bit of white. And there again, I'm going to pull from the outside in, pulling into that center. And you'll know right away if it's a color you like or not. I want a little more white in mine. So I'm going to go right on top again. That shows up better. A little bit more white than I had the first time. But I want to see the streaks of color. So I'm just picking up lots of white because that red is really strong. Pull from the outside all the way in. And just a light touch. Okay, and I'll do the same thing on the other side. So I've got the Tuscan Red and a little more white than I did the first time around because it really was a strong color. And it just takes a little bit of getting used to, but I love painting on the glass because it's actually a quick way to make a gift. And I don't have to trace anything on. Okay, now I should have showed you that if you're having trouble where it's looking too lumpy on the outside edge, let me show you what you could do to start with. You can go ahead and you could actually outline that. Let me take the other pink though. So if I switch to the liner brush, I could give myself a little ruffly edge and then be able to catch that color as I come down in. Okay. Now you can either stop when you get to this little bearded area that we've got in here, or you can pull through and then come back and put it in. I've done it both ways. So whatever makes more sense, but let me go back to my round brush now. And this time I'm going to try the other pink and then get some white. And I want a little bit more white where it touches the other petals so that they stand out from each other. But see how that maybe gives you a little bit better edge. If you need to give it a little bit of an outline, you sure can. So I think I'll do that again on the other bottom. Now we're going to be adding other colors around the edges, so I'm not really worried about going back and redoing my other ones, because let me show you here on the next step. See how we're going to go back and we're going to add some white around the edges, and so we can outline with the white and clean up those ruffled edges at that time. So just worried about getting the areas based in to start with. And there again, I've got a little bead of paint. Just scooping up. Got to be thicker, because if you've got too little paint on, you're not going to get a good coverage. So you've got to get more paint than you think. Now, another thing that I have is a cleanup and stipple set. Now, the little foam cleanup tool is really nice when your paint is wet and you make a mistake. You dip that little sponge into the water, blot it off, but you can go in and you can carefully remove an area or straighten up a line with that little sponge where your finger can't get into it. Okay. Once it dries, then you switch to the other little tool. It's a little micro stylus, and that you can go in and let's see if this is dry or not. You can actually just pick away a little edge and get rid of your little boo-boos that way. Okay. So those two tools are really handy to have. So I'll go back and finish my petal here. A little bit more white on that edge where it comes into the other petal, just so that they stand out a little bit more. Now, if you don't have, if that didn't happen, we're going to get it when we do our white lines anyway. So it's not the end of the world. You just got to have something on there to start with. And then I do all kinds of fixing and clean up with little lines. You should have a good coverage. If you've loaded your brush correctly, you should have a good coverage. Now, once we take our pattern out, we'll be able to see if we have any little air holes. So I'm not going to worry about those yet. And I know that you've been trained to not get ridges, but in glass painting, ridges are your friends. Okay, that's what gives us the vein lines. I like to have that little bit of dimension in the painting. Otherwise, it just looks flat, like it's been airbrushed. And I don't want airbrushed. I want it to look like it's hand painted. Now we're gonna let that dry, and then we're gonna go on to the leaves. Now, the leaf color that I originally used on this was the Deco Art glossy enamel, which was Hauser medium green. And that's a retired color. So festive green and dark chocolate mixed equal parts are the same color. Or you can use, was it woodland? Yeah, woodland green in the satin will work also. So I'm going to go ahead and use the woodland green. Now, if I was mixing this with the glossy enamels, I would squeeze out 2 equal dollops of paint and then just mix it with the end of the brush handle. And for this, we're just going to go ahead and use the straight color. We're not going to double load. And we're going to do the bigger leaves. Now, the trick is to try to stay out of the wet paint in your pansy. So try to maneuver your glass piece so that you're staying out of that wet paint. Sometimes I will even take, but I'll wait till afterwards. I hate to force dry too much. Sometimes if you force dry too much, you can get like a little crack where it separates the paint. You can fix it. You can just go back, put more paint on, but I like to let it dry naturally whenever possible. So I try to get as much of the area done as I can before I go back to do any details and have to force dry anything. A lot of times I'll do 2 pieces at the same time. That way, by the time, after I do all the basic basing in and I base in a second one, first one's ready to go. So it's always good to do 2 at the same time. Okay, now I'm going to still use that round brush, and I'm just really going to plump it up with that green paint. And then this time I want to really scoop up a little extra on the tip. I like to start at the outer tip of the big green leaves, and I'm going to pull in towards that center. And now I'm going to have to scoop up every time almost. And I want those ridges because those are going to be my vein lines. And you'll see that I'm pulling in at an angle. So look at the angle that you've got those areas separated. That's the angle I'm pulling in. Don't go back and soften out the ridges unless they wiggled in the wrong direction or something. But I allow those ridges to happen. And like I said, we'll be able to see once our pattern is out of there if we need to do little touch-ups, any little air holes, and that's not a problem. So do that on both sides of the leaf. Pull from the tip towards the center. And whatever your brush stroke is, don't worry about staying between those guidelines that I have. Use whatever your brush width is and just keep going. That was just to get you in the right direction. Lots of paint. Every time you stroke, redip and get more paint on there so that you have lots of paint getting that filled in. And I'm going to do just one side at a time. So we're going to do the big leaves on this side. We'll do the little ones, and then we'll go to the other side to do the other big leaves. Otherwise, sometimes I end up laying it where I'm going to get it too wet. So scooping up lots of paint. Pull from the tip in towards the center. You're pulling at an angle. Redipping every time. Lots of paint.
Now, I have a question. I have some, well, it was the Hauser Green Medium, but I guess it's old and it's folk art, but it's looks like it's kind of got floppy in parts of it.
Okay, so it's the folk art?
Yes.
Okay, you're going to need to add just a touch of water and loosen that up because it's going to be thicker than what I've got. So you want it creamy, but not transparent, if that makes sense. It usually comes a little thicker. Just add a little drop of water. So let me get, in fact, let me pull a folk art color out and show you. How's that? Let me grab one here. Well, I have a hunter green. Here, let me just do this. I'm going to just mix a couple of the folk art colors here just to get a fresh foliage. Okay. All right, so first I would start by getting close to the color that I want. Okay, now this is a lot thicker than what my gloss enamel and the other is. So what I do then is I am going to add just a little bit of water, and I just do it a little at a time, add some drips in there, stir it up. Now that already feels better. It's not a lot, but you want it to be creamy. So I think that feels pretty good. Okay, now I'm going to start with a clean brush, and I'll show you on the other piece of glass that I've got here. So let me show you on this other wine glass. Okay, so still getting, blot the water out. Okay, plump up the brush, scoop up. Am I in the camera? There we go. And don't push down hard, but it does work. You do want the ridges, but you want the ridges to go in the direction of what the vein lines would be. So if I get too big of a glob, yes, I can go back and soften it just a little bit. Okay, so I can go back on top again if I need to. But this is the folk art, and see, this works just as well. Works out nice too. But you do need to add that little drop of water, not a lot. You don't want to thin it too much. You just want it to be creamy and able to flow off your brush. And, as your, paint sits over the years in the bottles, there might be times where the deco art has gotten too thick, and you'll need to add just a little drop to that as well, or if it's sitting out on your palette. But you should be able to still get a great coverage. But see, you can see the ridges, but you want the ridges just so that they're pulled in the direction of the leaves. Now, as it dries, the ridges will soften. And then when you bake it, it softens a little bit more. Okay, but if they all disappear, if you flatten it, you're not going to have that dimension anymore. You're allowing the paint and the brushes to do half the work so that you're not having to do quite so much shading and highlighting and extra detail. Okay, so let me just quick finish my other big leaf here. And then we'll do the little leaves. Lots of paint. And I do want to follow through. Now, let's say that I only went halfway. Okay, I'm not going to just pick up there and go, because then it's not going to be a full stroke. I need to go back and start from the outer edge and pull through again. Okay, so don't dibby dab in the middle like this, like we can do with our other paintings. You want to make sure you go back and you pull all the way from the outside into the middle so that you're getting those vein lines, one complete stroke all the way from the outside edge in. Okay. And if you have a spot where that happened, you can go back right now and go ahead and repaint on top. Get that fixed. For the little leaves, we're going to add some white and some yellow. So any kind of a bright yellow works. And then this time I'm going to do all three colors. So I'll start with my same green, plump up the brush. Then pick up some yellow and some white. And then try a little leaf. And I'm going to do them in usually 2 strokes. So that it's a little, and then just keep picking up whatever color you feel like you're missing. You just go back, pick that color up, or get all 3 again. But this time I start at the base and pull towards the tip. Lots of paint, but I want it to be a different color. We're not going to be doing as much detail on this. So I want there to be the streaks of color in there. I've got some at the bottom here too. Lots of green, little yellow, little white. And if you didn't get enough paint on, you can go right back over it again. You don't have to wait. You can restroke it again if you need to. Once it starts to set up and get, you know, to that little stage where it starts getting tacky, then you have to wait, because otherwise you'll end up lifting it. So it gets that, but as long as it's still wet, go for it. But once you get that side done, you can do the other side. Just be careful that you're not, you know, laying it into that area. Or let's see how wet my other one is. You know, yeah, no, I think we'll be okay. Let's go ahead and get the leaves. Get all those done, get them dry. So start with my big leaves on the other side. And if you're getting too much of a clumpy edge, there again, use the little outline trick and then pull from that in, whichever feels easier. But lots of paint. Once you get used to it, this becomes a very quick style of painting. Now, if you're doing it on a wine glass, then I will, you know, bake it, and I'll talk to you more about all that after as well. But if I'm doing a flower base, I'm not going to worry about baking it unless if it's a little one like this, I could probably get away with it. But usually you're not, you know, washing it. It's not got daily use like you would the wine glass. Not that you would use your wine glass daily, but maybe you do. But this is more decorative. You could, once it sits for like 30 days, it pretty much cures. You can use a wet cloth to wipe it off. But you want your wine glass to be a little more durable. But this will last for years and years too. Just, you know, you're just not scrubbing it. And I do hand wash my wine glasses too, just because I've found that different detergents in the dishwasher can make a difference. The water in your area can make a difference. You know, some people have hard water, some have soft. So there's all those little elements that come into play when you're cleaning it. So I just have started doing the hand wash instead. And I have put some in the dishwasher, but I found other areas that there's been a problem, you know, like I said, due to the water, type of water in your area. So I got my other big ones done. I'm going to get my little ones. And don't worry about staying right in the lines. You know, the pattern is just kind of a suggestion. You let your hand go where it feels naturally to go. You can always come back, add little elements in afterwards to, you know, fill in empty spots. So I've got one little spot where I went a little outside of the leaf area that I wanted, so I can just take that little sponge thing and wipe it right off. But then I always want to make sure that I dip that sponge back in water and clean it, because if you let the paint harden on the sponge, it's not going to work as good anymore. So that's our first step, getting all of our elements just kind of filled in. And you'll see after too that, you know, I still like putting like little dots here and there, so we can direct those to areas, you know, that maybe you didn't quite, you know, get the paint just quite right. So the more you add, the more you camouflage any imperfections. And we're going to go back to our pansy next. So when you look at your photo, the second one is the next steps that we're going to do. So on the pansy, I've added, you know, a little bit of an outline and then some little lines coming in. Now, depending on what color your purple ended up being, sometimes I will make it not a bright white and I'll make it more of a pale, pale lavender. So if you need to put just a teeny touch of your lavender into your white so that it doesn't stand out quite so much. I like contrast. I like big, bold, so I'm good with the white myself. But I want you to be happy with your piece. So if it feels like it's standing out too much, you can put a little bit of lavender into it. You could even just start with like purple cow if you've got a darker petal, and you could just put but I can tell on mine purple cow is not going to show up because I've got a lot of white in with my lavender. So I'm going to need to go right to the white on mine. But if white seems like it's too stark, step back a little bit in your contrast. Okay. Okay. So let's take a look at the purple petals first. Now, I don't want to go all the way across and run in to that one in front. Let's start with the one in the back. And you're either going to use a pale lavender or you're going to use white. It has to show up. So whichever one shows up on your piece. And I'm going to use a liner brush. Now, let me start with the one that comes with the brushes. If that feels too thick, now that we have a base of paint on here, if you need to switch to, let's see, where did I put mine? To a regular liner brush because you're working on top. Now, you could use a regular liner brush as long as you're on top of a color. When you're working on the flat glass, it's not going to cover. It's just going to slide. But once you're on top of another color, you can switch to a regular liner. Let me start with just my one in the kit here. 10-aught liner that comes in the glass art kit. Once you wet it, see how it comes more to a point. Otherwise, it's fluffy to start with. It looks pretty thick. So I'm going to just take some white and plump up my brush. Okay, I'm going to kind of twist it, make sure I have that point. But guess what? I still got to get a little tip of white on there again. All right, because you can't have it too skinny. Okay, then I'm going to go on my outer edge and barely touching. And see, I can get a skinny line. As soon as I push down, it's going to get fat. I'm just letting it kind of trickle off that tip. Okay, then I'm going to pull in some little white lines, all different lengths, following the curve of whatever my brush stroke was underneath. And that's our little highlight lines. Instead of highlighting and shading by floated color or corner loads, I do it with little lines on the glass. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. Now, if your paint feels too thick, you can put the teeniest, tiniest drop of water into it. If it doesn't feel like it's coming off, it needs to be creamy. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the other petal and go ahead and get a little bit of an outline and just roughly. It's okay if you have like a little bit of a nervous hand because it'll just give it a little more ruffle. And that one, it looks like I did go all the way around. If the glass art liner brush feels too big for you, switch to a normal liner. Then I'm going to pick areas to pull the lines in. I want them all different lengths. And kind of skip around a little bit. You don't want it to be the same all the way across. Some areas pull it in longer, some just keep them short. I think I'll just leave it at that. Now we'll be coming back after and pulling some dark lines up from the centers or the base of the petals. This is just what you see on your second photo. When you look at the last photo, you'll see the darker lines that are going to be added in there afterwards. Help get a little more depth in the dark areas. And we'll have to mix that because there again, the dark purple was dioxazine purple was a retired color. So I just mixed Tuscan red and true blue. Okay, and then I'm going to keep going. I'm going to do the same thing on the pink petals. However, on this one on the bottom, I'm going to start with that one first, I think. I want to get these little round, it's almost like it's a comma stroke or a teardrop, but I'm just dabbing it in. I want it to be like, it's almost like it's little dots. And then it gets pointy, and then that's going to connect into the edge of the petal. It's that little fuzzy, or a little flip on the petal. And I'm just tapping it in with the tip with the white and pull it out skinny. And then I can connect to the outline on the edge. And I did outline this one all the way around as well. Then I can pull my little white lines in. And I did them more off to each side and not necessarily in the bottom center. So I kept them more off to each side. Now, what would you do if your line got too thick? Let's say I don't like this. Here, I'm going to make it thick on purpose. Okay, so here I've got a line and it just got way too thick for me on that white. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back with that. I must be dropping my liner brushes. There it is. Okay. I'm going to go back and I'm going to come back in with some pink, the opposite direction. So let me get little pink, little white on there. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to try to, a little darker pink, I guess. Try to cut that in half. See how that blended in now? So you can always go backwards to fix a line that got too thick. Just use a liner to go back and just pull some streaks of color backwards. Okay, now the side petals. Now it looks like, let me just check on my original. Okay, now the original I outlined the whole way around. It looks like on the, I went ahead and outlined the entire edge, where it looks like on my step-by-step, I did more of a pink on that edge rather than white. And I may have done that as an afterthought because maybe the white was standing out too much on this particular one. So let's go ahead, start with the white. If we feel it's too stark after we get our shadow in, we'll go on top of it with some pink and soften it, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and do both outer edges on both sides and then pull in my white. Okay, now I feel like my white's getting a little thick. I'm putting the tiniest drop of water in there because now I'm on top of another paint color and I can get away with that. If we try to do that too much on a base coat area, it's just going to slide off the glass. It's not going to stick as well. And I can reshape things. So if I feel like I needed my petal to come out a little bit more, I can just add a little bit more white on the edge. And then while that's wet, drag little lines in. So I can reshape the outer edges of any of the petals that way. We can always go back and touch things up. It's hard to know if it's what you want until you got all the elements in there, all the, shading, all the highlighting, then you can tweak it. Add a little more of one thing or another or reshape up an edge. It's never done till you say it's done. Then I'm going to go ahead and put, I think, my yellow in there. If the yellow, if it's too transparent, depending on what you're using, sometimes I've had to do it with white first and then yellow on top. Let me see if this is going to work on mine. I'm using it thick. Yeah, actually, I'm going to do some white in there because I'm going to just go ahead and stop. I'm going to mix some white into my yellow and then I'll do a second layer with just the yellow because the yellow is pretty transparent. So if you mix some white into it, it becomes more opaque. So I'm just going to get that area. I don't know if you can see that. So can you see that just the plain yellow is pretty transparent? So put some white in it and then we'll come back with the straight yellow after that undercoat dries. And then that way it'll fill in better. So white with a little yellow in it. Go ahead, get that little yellow kind of beard thing coming out. Just so we don't forget where it's at. Little lines, just using the liner brush. And we are going to be taking our pattern out pretty soon, but what I want you to do before you do that is just where all those little dot flowers are, just do a yellow center. Just do a little circle. Just so we remember where it's at. And it doesn't even have to be the finished. I just kind of go around. I've got it on the tip of my brush and I just kind of go around in a circle with the tip of the brush. We can put another coat on after. I just don't want to lose where they're at. So a little bead of paint on the tip of the round brush. Just kind of go around in a little circle. I've got my brush at like a 45-degree angle in my hand. Just kind of swirl it around a little bit. Don't worry about the other petals. This will just remind us where they should be. Okay, and then once you get that part done, we're going to go ahead and take our pattern out. Because as we do the shading colors and the other highlights and things on the leaves, we want to be able to fill in those little air holes that we missed with our base coat. And just be patient with yourself for the next stages. It's going to look more transparent now once you take the pattern out from underneath. If you have a white towel that you can put underneath it, paper towel, you'll be able to see your colors better rather than like a dark desk color or something. And now my leaves, when you look at them now, you'll see how transparent some of those areas are. But you know what? By the time we get our shading and highlighting lines, it's not a problem. So I am not going to go back and rebase coat any of that. It'll just get touched up with the next steps. And the same with the flower petals. If I need to, once I do my shadow color, then I'll look and see, do I need some of that medium value back in there? And I'll just do it with little lines to clean up those areas. But see how I've got the nice ridges and the brush strokes and the leaves? And it's just lots of paint. Now, mine have settled down a lot from the first time when I based them in. They've leveled out a little bit. They're not quite as thick of ridges as when I first started. So the paint does level a little bit. And then when I bake it, it levels a little bit more. All right. Then I'm going to continue working on the pansy. So I need that dark purple color. And I am going to just mix the Tuscan red and the blue equal parts. So I'm going to put like a pea size of the Tuscan red, pea size of the true blue. And then mix those together. And I have a dark purple. And I'm just going to be using my liner brush. So I'm going to start by putting in that little dark hole in the front of my little petal here. So just kind of tap that in and then just pull some little lines. Now, if it's easier to switch to your regular liner brush, you sure can. I'm just using the Glass Art 10-aught liner. Just carefully pulling that tip. Okay, now I pulled that a little too far to the side. I'm going to take that off. I wanted it more rounded in the front, so I'm just going to take a wet brush here and pull it back. Just carefully. And then I'll be able to, I want it a little bit more rounded, not so flat. So get that little hole in there. And then you're going to see that there is purple lines that come out on each side from that yellow area. Let's do that next. And I think I am going to switch to my regular liner brush this time for that, because I want them to be thin. And because I'm painting on top of another color, I can get away with using the regular brush now. And these are little markings that are actually in the petals. It's not a shadow, it's actual markings. The little flower fairies come and they have fun with the petals and just paint little colors here and there. I'm trying to keep it more off to each side. And there's so many different colors of pansies these days. I just love them. Okay, and then I'm going to use that same purple and the same skinny brush, little liner brush, and I'm going to pull out from the pink petals now on each side, little lines about halfway. There again, make them all different lengths. Follow through with the direction of your brush stroke that's underneath though. And I'll be doing the same thing on the purple petals, pulling from the base of the petal up into the rest of the petal. And sometimes, you know, you're having to hold your glass at an awkward angle to not get your fingers in the wet areas. And now until I bake this or let it dry for a month, it's not permanent. So like this glass, I can take this over to the sink and wash it right off, just scrub it up a little bit, wash it off. And I've done that when I've been designing. Sometimes it doesn't come out the way I want. I may have done the whole thing, take the whole thing over, scrub it off and try again. Because it's, you know, what's up in your mind doesn't always come out on your brush every time. So, and it's only a dollar store item, so it's not a, okay, now this other one, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and outline because it's a little bit easier then to pull those dark lines out of there. So I'll outline between the two petals and then pull that purple in. And just follow through with the direction of the stroke underneath. And after you do that, if you need to touch up, you know, the top edges of those pink petals, you sure can. Because I know I'm not always real accurate, so I'll just re-outline those a little bit better again. You know, or even the same with the other purple petals. Don't be afraid to do little touch-ups. And then I want to get that yellow back in. So I'm going to really scoop up the yellow. Now, if it's still too transparent, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a touch of red in it. But I want this just really thick, and I think it's going to be okay. I don't mind if it blends in a little bit, you know, with the colors underneath. But I want that yellow to pop. And that shows up pretty good for me. If you needed to add just a touch of your red in there to make it more of an orangey yellow, that does show up better too. And I'm going to give you some other ideas because I never know when to quit. Here's another pansy one with that same design, but I kept going. I put a I put a border around the backside. I put little dots coming down. So, I mean, you can just, it's hard to know when to quit. It's just really fun to paint on the glass. And, you know, when I did the border, I just started by putting some dots like a finger width apart, and then I added my stroke work. So I didn't measure it accurate because I'm too lazy, but I could have taken a piece of paper, you know, put it across the area that I want to measure for the border, and then fold that paper, fold it in half again, fold it in half again, so that I would have my, you know, markings for the distance. And then the little dots, you know, you can just use a stylus to add little dots coming down, but it's really kind of fun. And then I will show you after, I did not do the base of this glass. And the reason is, I'm finding, depending on where you're using your glass at, sometimes in the summer, the heat will loosen that paint underneath, moist heat. So then I'm getting it sticking to like a place. I've got painted placemats that I put mine on, right? So then it was sticking. So I kind of quit doing that, but it is a cool illusion. So I just make sure those glasses, when I use them, that I'm using it on something that it may not stick to. So, but look at how it looks like the color is coming up the stem. And all it is painting the bottom. And it looks like it's coming up the stem. It's the coolest illusion. So as long as you're, you know, like, it's not going to stick to like this paper here. It's another painted surface is what I'm talking about. Because I have placemats that I like to use to decorate the table and stuff. So then, you know, it sticks to that varnish. So get started with, we need a dark green and we need a light green. So I've got green beret that I'm going to use in the satin. Let's see what that was equivalent to. If you have the glossy enamel, it's festive green and black. 2 parts festive green, 1 part black. So it's just, you just want a dark green. Otherwise, green beret and the satin. Folk art was hunter green plus licorice, which is a black. There we go. And then we want, this is the color I want, but it's I think it's a discontinued color. So it would be using your base color with just a touch of yellow, touch of white in there. In fact, let me just scoop a little off to the side here to show you. Some white. A little more yellow. And just anything close, you know, is going to work, but that's going to be pretty close to what here was the original. So that's pretty close. So green, yellow, and white for a lighter color. Okay, so let's start with the lighter one. Okay, so I'm going to pull a center vein, and then I'm going to pull little lines out. And I will put an outline between the two as well. Okay, so let's start with just the highlights on the big leaves. Use either brush, either your regular liner or the Glass Art 10-aught liner. Either one should work. Okay, so I'm going to load the brush with that lighter green color. And just scoop a little bit more up on the tip. You got to get it tipped so that it's a easy angle to pull, but I'm going to start by adding a center vein. And then I'm going to pull little lines out on each side from there. Now afterwards, just so you know, we can pull darker lines to separate. So we're just going to do all the way through. We're not going to worry about separating at this stage. I'm only going to do it on one side. And I would say about 2/3 of the way into the leaf. And I'm just using the 10-aught liner in the glass art. Lots of paint on the tip. Very, very light touch. Center vein and then outline where they touch. And then pull little lines from that center vein. Okay, there again, we're going to do one side of the glass at a time. So we're going to go, after we do this, we're going to go ahead and put our dark color in there too. The dark green next. So fested green and black. 2 parts. Two parts green. So like 2 pea sizes and then 1 pea size of black. Mix that together. And if it's easier to make a line first, that's always a good idea, and then pull little lines out from that. Okay. So I think that's easier. I'm going to go ahead and outline the other side first. Down the center vein and then pull little lines out from that. Try to have a very light touch. You'll get a thinner line. Worst case, you just go backwards with your base coat color to break up any of the lines that got to be too dark, or any of the parts of the leaves. So just do those 2 on this side. We'll wait for the other side. And once I get those lines, what I want to do is I want to outline just a little ways on the other side of that center vein so that I have the light green in the middle and put the dark line on the other side. If I mess it up, I just go back and put the light green in a little bit better, which I do need to do because I want it to be like a dark line on the opposite side of that center vein so that it makes it look like that vein line is popping up. It's supposed to be a little bit more of a hard ridge. And then I can pull some lines to separate through the light green area, and just however many you want. You decide how wide you want those strokes. I kind of try to look for the ridges and try to follow with where my ridges originally were. And if you feel that your little leaves are good enough, all I did was add a little dark line in the center of those. But if you feel you need another coat, do that first. And if you remember, that was just the base color green, and then picked up some yellow and some white. Everything doesn't have to be solid coverage. Remember, we're painting on glass. And so some areas being a little transparent just lend itself to the look of the glass. And then it's just a matter of tweaking the leaves. Do you like them as is? Do you feel you want more color in them? Because I could always add some more highlight color, or I could even pull some color from the outside edges on the opposite side a little bit lighter. You have a lot of chance to play with this. And so let me just give you some ideas. Not that I didn't do it on this one. I just left it as is, okay? But like I said, I never know when to quit. So I just want to give you other suggestions in case you want to play after a little bit more. So I could go and do, take my highlight color, add a little bit of yellow and a little bit of white, make it one more shade lighter. And I could add a little bit lighter ones in the base. You know, the more values you add, the more dimension you're going to get. It's just a matter of how much time you want to spend on it. I could even put a little line in the center of the vein, brighten that up a little bit. So then take a look at the two leaves. You decide which you like better. And if I wanted, I could even outline, you know, maybe one edge of the small leaves if you feel like they need to be cleaned up, and it could either be with a light color or the dark color. I just, like I said, I never know when to quit. I love playing in it. But since I did the other one, I got to do this one now. But the original one, I didn't do this to. I just giving you one more option. But you could take basically any of your patterns, tape them inside. You just have to do it more like a color book rather than, you know, the floated color and corner load. However, now that I mentioned that, let me show you that step 2. Put that off to the side. So let's say, actually, now I'm going to use my round brush. Okay, so there are flat brushes in the kit, depending on how big you're working. But your round brushes, you can actually pinch them and make them into a flat brush, and that's what I'm going to do. Okay. All right, so here was, first I'm going to wet it, blot off the paint. Okay, so here was that color that I base coated with. So I always have to use the color I base coated with. Pat that into the brush. Okay, then I'm going to corner load and see how I flattened that out, made it into a flat brush. Okay, then I'm going to get a corner load of the shadow color. Just test that carefully. Okay, so now if I wanted, I could create shadows that way. Now I'm skipping because I'm pretending there's like a little vein line separating these. I could have gone straight down. But that's another way of doing it if you want to do it that way. But I've gotten to where I just really like the little lines, doing the little lines. So if I, and there again, if I get that original color back on there and I grab some highlight color on the other side, you know, and I can highlight an edge that way too. So maybe doesn't show quite as much here. Hang on. A little more color. So you can do corner load and do things that way too. It's just you have to do the double load with whatever the base coat color is. All right, then I'm ready to go to the other side. I'm going to do the same thing over there that I did on the first side. I'm going to start with my lighter green color here. Bump it up in the brush first, and then pick up a little tip of color and pull center vein, and then pull lines out. Same thing on the other one, center vein line with a lighter green. Then go to the darker green. Pull a center vein with a darker green. Pull lines out. Center vein. And pull lines out. Okay, then I'm going to do a darker vein line on the other side of the light green here. So I've got a lighter vein line. And I switched to my skinnier regular liner brush for that, just so I can be a little bit lighter, a little bit thinner line that way. Okay, and then go ahead, pull the separating lines out on each side of the lighter. And because I did that lighter color of green on the other side, I've got to do them on these. So I mixed that green and yellow and white. So I've got to add some lighter in the base of each of my highlight areas. Oh, I got a drip of water that came down the brush. So I've got to stop, blot that, and I'm going to catch it just with the tip of my towel here. Not going to rub it, but get it out of my brush. My brush, when I rinsed it, I don't always blot it good enough, so I got to stop and re-blot it. I don't want that water in there. And then I had put a little outline on one side of each of my little leaves. So I'm going to do that again on this side. Try and keep it consistent, and then it'll have the dark line in the middle of each of those. And you can still go back and touch up any areas, you know, whether they're wet or dry. So if you see something on your pansy that you need to, you know, touch up, you can do that at any time, or the leaves. Okay, now when you look at my leaves, now I think you saw how transparent they were in the center, but now that I've got my other steps done, see, it was not necessary to do a second coat because you keep adding other layers of colors. Same with the pansy, was not necessary for a second coat. It has a lot to do with the brushes and how you load it. You've just got to forget about what you do in your normal painting. It's just a totally different technique. I know we all want to like get rid of the ridges and flatten it down, but you can't do that with this. Yeah, and you don't want to, because that's how you get it looking more dimensional. And that's how I get the good coverage. Okay, and I'm looking at my back pedal here. I'm going to put a little bit more lavender, crop off a little bit of that white. Just try to get that petal a little darker again. And I'm just doing it with little thin lines right in the center area. Not basing in. Let's see how I can make that darker just with little lines again. I could do the same if I need to adjust any of the pink. I can just pull little lines in the center of the areas. Otherwise, what's left is our little dot flowers and some white dots within the design. Okay, let's go ahead and do the little flowers around the edges then. They can be whatever colors you want them to be. I just wanted like a variety of color. I did double load them, and I did use the round brush for that. Let's see, I'm not sure what size I said. Yeah, I used, like on mine, I'm going to use the size 3 round brush because I want bigger dots on this vase. You might want to use, if you're working on a smaller one, use the number 1 round. But there again, I really plumped the brush up. So let's say I'm going to do some lavender ones. I'm going to take my round brush and plump up, get lots of lavender on there. Okay, really plump it up. So it's a lot. And then I'm going to pick up some of the white and just make my dots. Now I hold the brush at a 45-degree angle. Okay. And just pull just a little bit. And I get pretty round, fairly round dots that way. Okay, so plump it up. It's got to have a lot of paint. Get some white. Do the same on the bottom here. Just set the brush down and pull. So when I plumped it up, I was flattening that brush. But I can, and you can always test it on your palette first to see if you've got it going the way you want. But if I don't like those, remember, I can take them off. If I've got the little sponge tip there, that works good. You could get a wet brush and try and wipe it out. Just got to be a little more careful. I'm going to do some pink. Plump it up with some pink. And get some white. And don't be afraid if you have to overlap a leaf here and there. Lots of paint. Flatten the brush out. Just hold it 45-degree angle so that you, just a quick little swipe. Remember, you don't like it, you can take it off, try it again. That's, you know, another good thing about the painting on the glass is you can take your mistakes off easy. Okay, and I got 2 purple ones I missed. Lump it up, lots of paint. And don't wipe that excess paint off. You need that on your brush. Get some white. And sometimes I can't even always get the entire flower in one load of paint. Sometimes I got to stop and get more on. And then it's just adding little white dots, and you could use the other end of your brush, but you got to make sure your white is fresh. So instead of using what is already on my palette, I'm going to put a little dab on the top of it here so that I have to get into. And just take the wooden end of your brush. And I kind of like it where it separates the leaves. And even though it's clear glass, it shows up nice on the clear glass. So you add as many as you want. Use it to fill in little empty spaces. Another thing, when you're painting like a wine glass, you try not to get paint up around the rim that you're going to be sipping your wine from, because you have people that chew the edges of their glasses. You just don't want to be, even though this is non-toxic, you still don't want to eat paint chips. Now, I've done it where I've gotten it really close to the top rim, but then I drink from the opposite side. So I'm not drinking, you know, not that it's going to come off, but you do have chewers. And I do want to show you, if you'd like to put paint on the bottom of your glass, I do want to show you that so that you know how to do it. But I think this will be a fun little vase to have. Put a cute little ribbon around it now and fill it full of flowers for somebody for a gift. There again, just dollar store stuff is fun. I also find a lot of fun glassware really now at the different hobby stores, or the like TJ Maxx or Home Goods. They'll have fun clear glassware too. Now, if you're good at freehanding, you can do the ceramic mugs and things that are not see-through, but they do have clear coffee cups too. I want to say Walmart had some. So, all right. So that is basically it for all the elements on our design, but let me go ahead and show you how to do the bottom of your glass. So I'm going to take the one that I've already got done here, and what I do is I turn it upside down. And I just have to decide what color I want. Let's see, I have the other one was pink. Maybe I'll do this, the lavender. Should I do the lavender? Yeah. Okay, so what I do is I take and squeeze about the size of a dime right in the middle of the glass. Then I take the big fluffy brush, and I don't wet it, the big glass art flat brush, and I'm going to hold it back on the handle so that it's loose. I don't want a death grip on it, okay? And I'm going to gently pull that color out and around. Light touch. I don't want to squish down. And I don't know if you can tell, but I'm getting a one coat coverage. Okay, now I'll have to let that dry good first. But see how that looks like it's coming up through the glass, the stem? Gotta cool. So now I gotta let that dry. Okay, so for finishing your glass, if you can let it dry a couple days at least, that's the best. Then you're gonna put it in your oven, cold oven. And I like to put mine on a cookie sheet upside down, especially if I've painted the bottom. Okay, cookie sheet upside down, cold oven. Turn your oven to 325. Let it stay in there for 30 to 40 minutes. I do 40 just because I want to make sure. Then when the timer goes off, shut the oven off and let it stay in there until the oven is totally cold. And then it makes it really pretty permanent. I've had very good luck. Now, where it has been a problem is if it's gone in the dishwasher too many times. The moist heat is what causes it to release from the glass. Okay, so keep that in mind. Really hot, sticky hand in the summertime could also, cause. So I quit doing like the handles of coffee cups. Okay, and I wouldn't do the stem of my glass either. Something that you're hanging on tight with a hot hand. Those areas I wouldn't paint anymore. And it took a long time before there was a problem. It took years, before I had the problem, but it can happen. Now I can touch it up. I could put more paint on and rebake it again, but when you give it for a gift, they can't do that. So you tell them to hand wash, and just don't paint handles is probably for the best. And otherwise, I think that's it.